and welcome to this, the 15th episode of Qatsyr Harvest. On today's program, I'm going to reprise a little of what we covered in our last program. That would be the concluding hour of Family Hour, which of course was 2 hours in our normal style, just an evening ago. And what I would like to do is to expand from there, because we were about to come to a statement that I think I may have misrepresented and made it sound way more inclusive than what God intended. So over the intervening time, I have decided to go back through all of my translations for this presentation of the Shabuah harvest and Dabarim, which is the last presentation of Shabuah, which is the promise of 7 or 7 Sabbaths, this festival feast that demarcates the beginning of the time of Jacob's troubles and an opportunity for us to prepare for Yahweh's return, which is the conclusion, obviously, of Jacob's troubles in all of the Torah. So this is the last Torah presentation of Shabuah, and I wanted to make certain that we got it right. So this is what I have learned, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. The text begins, 6 days. You should actually and consistently consume matzah, unyeasted bread. And in the 7th day, come together for a celebration to approach Yahweh, your God. 6 plus 1 is the pattern really throughout human history that God wants us to follow. There will soon have been 6,000 years of us separated from the garden until we get to return to it. These dates are important, so I'll reiterate them. They are 3968 BCE, which is when Adam and Chawah in year 0 were expelled from Gan Eden, the Garden of Great Joy. 40 Yobel, which is a time of testing. Yobel is a time of freeing us from human bondage schemes, such as religion and politics, forgiving our debts so that we appear perfect before God, and then of us returning to the land, which is the intent of all of the Mikra, where they lead. So 40 Yobel, which are 50-year periods, 7 times 7 plus 1, which mirrors the exact timing also of Shabuah, which means it's worth presenting it here because the twice-century celebration of the Yobel reflects our annual celebration of Shabuah and have a very similar purpose. So 40 Yobel from 3968 BCE is 1968 BCE. It's 2,000 years, brings us to year 2000 Yah. It was then that Abraham and Yishak climbed Mount Moriah after a 3-day journey, such that as they reached the summit of Mount Moriah, Yahweh provided the lamb, demonstrating a harbinger of Pesach's fulfillment to come. And it would be exactly 40 Yobel thereafter, from 1968 BCE, when Abraham and Yishak affirmed the narrative of the covenant, to the time in 33 CE that our Messiah and Son of God, our prior king and returning king, David, enabled the covenant by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim. So now we're at year 4000 Yah, knowing that God has a very distinct pattern. If you were to add now 40 Yobel, or 2,000 years from 33 CE, you reach year 6000 Yah, which is the year that Yahweh will fulfill Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, so that we witness the herald and attend the family reunion, such that we end up camping out with Yahweh for all time. This is the 6 plus 1 with 6 days, 2 or 3 2,000-year periods preceding the 1,000-year celebration of camping out with God during the millennial celebration of Sukkah. So 6 days plus 1, just as we have 6 plus 1 Moed Mikre, taking us there. Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, Shabuah, Towrah, Kippurim are the 6 that lead to Sukkah. There were also 6 days of creation leading to the final day that Yahweh celebrated and blessed the result. So 6 days you shall actually and continually consume matzah. Matzah is listed here because matzah is bread without yeast, without chametz, without this fungus that permeates the loaf and represents the corrupting factors of religion and politics. So matzah's purpose is to make us appear perfect before God. And this is technically achieved because after fulfilling Pesach, where he sacrificed his bashar corporeal body in his second of 3 lives, Dod's nefesh soul carried our guilt with him into Sheol, depositing it there never to be seen again. This then leads to firstborn children, where we are adopted into God's family, enriched and empowered on this day. So 6 days you should actually and continually consume matzah, unyeasted bread. And in the 7th day, come together for a celebration to approach Yahweh, your God. Now, while we can celebrate in the presence of Yahweh by reading his Torah and prophets, by coming to appreciate all he has done for us, by becoming part of his covenant family, as we don't actually enter God's presence on this day. This is a day to celebrate our approach to Yahweh, because we will approach Yahweh on a different day. Immediately thereafter, now that we're celebrating all that Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim represent, knowing how Dod David came in his second of 3 lives to voluntarily fulfill them for our benefit, and knowing what comes thereafter and how long it would be before we would be celebrating Shabuah, and how Shabuah would usher in Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, God encourages his people, but do not interfere with the work of the Malaka, the heavenly messenger and the spiritual counselor. So after having followed Yahweh's instructions regarding Pesach and Matzah, and receiving the benefit of our souls being unleavened from the corruptive fungus of religion and politics, we are prepared to come together for a celebration with Yahweh our God. And yet, since there is work still to be done before the party begins, before all of the attendees are properly prepared and gathered for that meeting with God, Yahweh asks his people not to interfere with the work of the Malaka, his heavenly messenger, who will serve as his Kol, voice, his Bashar, herald, and the spiritual counselor, known as the Nakri, who is the Choder, replete with the 7 Ruach of Yahweh. Then, as a result of what Yada will make known as a result of being imbued with the benefit of the 7 Ruach of Yahweh, God says, you should consistently recount the written documentation communicated on how to relate to. You should narrate and enumerate the words in the book and quantify, explain, and inform about them in writing regarding the record of 7, the promise of Shabuah, 7s, and thus weeks as the promise of the Shabat, and how it pertains to you, beginning by bringing a sickle, the cutting implement for liberating, separating, gathering, and harvesting, to ha-kamah, the standing grain. Kamah is from kum, and it means that which is upright, firmly rooted, standing, rising, ratified, confirmed, and established, ready to be raised. Begin, Chalal, to recount the written word regarding 7 promises and Shabbats. Dabarim, which is crudely renamed by a Greek title, Deuteronomy, which means second law, 16:9. Dabarim is the correct title of the book. It means words. Now, the message here is that we should be especially thoughtful regarding how we should relate to 7 and Shabuah, deducing what we can from what was documented in writing and then communicated to all willing to listen. Whether Yahweh is addressing now this documented book of the Torah alone, the Torah and his prophets, are also Yada Yahowah, since it explains both and brings both to the attention of his people at this time, is of course worth considering, because they were all communicated in writing, and all 3 are mutually supportive and pertinent in this situation. And while there would be no Yada Yahowah without the Torah, without Yahweh, Yada Yahowah, no one would understand these Torah instructions. Moreover, this is specifically about timing. And I'm the first to share the timing of Shabuah with Yisrael, Yehudim, and even Goyim, to correctly deduce that Shabuah, as 7s, comes 7 years prior to Yahweh's and Dod's return in year 6000 Yah 2033, making it the Shabuah of May 26th, May 22nd of 2026. At first strike of the sickle, liberating the kamah, the standing grain, there is a tendency to see the kamah, the standing grain, in connection with Shabuah. After all, one follows the other, but that is not actually what this conveys. We are to count 7 7s from cutting the grain to the celebration of Shabuah, and that means that this use of kamah, deeply rooted and upright, established and standing grain, pertains to the barley harvest on Bikurim, which is firstborn children. This known, we are reminded that the invitees and celebrants on Shabuah are there because they relate to the written word, particularly as it pertains to narrating the story of 7 7s and the promise of the Shabat, and enumerating what can be known and communicating it to all Yisrael. Now, this leads to another important clue. God does not present us, in this case, as simple attendees who answer his invitation. We are instead attending to business. Rather than waiting around to be harvested, we're engaged in the process, assuring the most beneficial and productive result. Unlike Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, where Yahweh and Dod serve our interests, here we are co-workers and contributors Did you know that? Are you ready? Are you excited about that prospect? Moshe, speaking for Yahweh, said, "Then you should act upon and engage in the festival feast of Shavuot, to approach Yahweh, your God, with a solvent, a voluntary offering of one's initiative from your hand, which, to demonstrate the way to benefit from the relationship, you can actually and consistently give, when compared to how in this relationship Yahweh, your God, continues to bless and adore you, to favor you and lift you up." Now let's go back, because this is so different than what might have otherwise been expected. I think we should really ponder the implications of each word here and make certain that we have this right, because I think this is exceedingly exciting. I just think this is best possible news. And by the way, the reason that I've gone back to this material is that on Saturday morning, after the show we did on Friday night, I woke up very early, 2 hours before the sun, maybe more. And I, in my head, this same thing kept on resonating. Yahweh's jab at me years ago, when I had asked him about the harvest, and he said, "Where do you think you're going?" And then I kept on thinking that selfishly, it might sound like a grand idea to be taken on a all expenses paid trip of the universe, escorted by Yahweh himself, and get out of Dodge for off the island, if you might, in my particular case, for a while, recharge, and after an enjoyable Shabbat with Yahweh, come back and finish the job. But then I said, that's really not a very good idea at all. I mean, for the last 23 and a half years, I've been devoted to a singular purpose, trying to protect Israel from the religious and political tyrants that are trying to destroy her, and then to share what can be known about Yahweh, to reintroduce Yahweh's name, to reacquaint Israel with their actual Messiah and the Son of God, the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, Makurim, to appraise Israel of God's timing and where they are in all of this, to warn them about the approach of the time of Yaakov's troubles, to explain how each of the prior 3 Mikre were fulfilled, by whom, where, when, and how the next 4 will be fulfilled. When, where, how, why. There's a lot to convey to assure that Yahweh has the kind of homecoming and family reunion that he deserves, and that is our responsibility to make a contribution to. And I said, how are we going to do that if we're off on vacation for 3.5 years? At the absolute most important time to be conveying this message. Doesn't seem fair. God, can't we do more? Can't we stay here and get this job done? What's 3.5 years compared to all eternity? And I just kept on agonizing over this, that God loves his people. He wants them to hear his message. They're entering the worst time in their history, and he wants someone there to protect them, to look out after them, to help reacquaint them with his name and his Son and his plans. And so I devoted myself all day yesterday to going and studying everything that I could about Shabuah and the circumstances surrounding Shabuah to see if it was like Bikurim. On Bikurim, there was only one person brought back home on Bikurim. That was Dowd. Everybody else, it was those of us who celebrate it are enriched, we're empowered, we're adopted into Yahweh's family. We are perfected. We're really put in a position where we're able to pursue the goals of Shabuah. And so is Shabuah the same thing? Where we're once again, just as was the case on Bikurim, empowered and enriched on this day so that we can pursue the goal of the next harvest down the road, which is Teruah? Is that its purpose? Does its purpose reflect Bikurim? Since, after all, Shabuah is a Bikurim harvest. So as I was wanting to know the answer to that, and I will have to say that before I do this, the reason I wanted to know the answer to it was severalfold, and one of them may surprise you. I've always wanted to be able to stay to the last moment. I've shared that with the Covenant family hundreds and hundreds of times. The longer we can stay and the more progress we can make towards reacquainting Yisrael with Yahweh, the better. And so staying longer has never been a concern to me. It's actually been something I've wanted to occur. And it really doesn't matter from a practical point of view if we give everything we have to offer. We study Yahweh's testimony. We learn as much as we can learn. We share what we have come to know as openly and as appropriately as possible. And we then work as a family around that to make certain that this message is conveyed to as many people and as appropriately and professionally as can be done in a manner that's befitting our God. Does it really matter if we do as much as we can with the knowledge that for some of us that time will end on Shabuah, or we do it, recognize, let's get as much as we can done on Shabuah and be prepared to go beyond it if given that opportunity? From a practical point of view, does it really matter? And other than for those who want to know, how should I plan financially, or how should I plan in terms of, my home and loved ones and pets and that sort of thing, does it really matter? Are you eager for a vacation, or are you eager to make a contribution? And even as it relates to the more mundane things in life, I've long just assumed, based upon who Yahweh is and everything he's done up to this point, that since I've been able to rely on Yahweh to protect myself and my family and my home against all comers, thousands of death threats over these years, and a single tumble and fall, that just maybe, that if we do have an intermission, that Yahweh's got Malak in position to make certain that anything that we want protected between now and then is handled. So why sweat the details? So it's within that I share this with you, and I also wanted, because as Leah said, there's a lot of people that are making plans based upon the events and the timing that you have conveyed, and I wanted to nip that in the bud. Your job, if you are a member of the covenant family, is to support Yada as the Zeroah, as the Bashar, as the Kol of Yahweh. You are to work in conjunction with and support the work of the Malaka. You're not to be the Malaka. You're not to be the Nakri, the Choder. you to support that work. And in supporting that work, your primary concern should not be your finances or your pets or your home or when you get to enjoy the first well-deserved vacation. It should be to give as much as you can. I mean, I understand people have many challenges in life. Yahowah managed to clear the deck for me so that this is my sole responsibility, and I appreciate that. And I understand that is not true for other people, and I've got no issue with that. But the time that you can contribute, please do, and do so not thinking that you only have 15 or months to go, and then you don't have to worry about it from there, because that's not what this message says. Also, I have been really forthright on this. Yahowah never says that Shabuah is on the 22nd of May and the Roman religious calendar of the year 2026. What he does say is he gives us ample information for us to know precisely when he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim with Dod, because Dod, as Gabriel, told Daniel exactly when he would arrive in Jerusalem to do so. And we trace that mathematically right to the heart of Chag Matzah in year 33 CE, making that year 4000 Yah. And it's not difficult to go back, because exactly 1,000 years prior to that is when the cornerstone of the house for Yahweh's name, the first temple, was laid. And we can use the chronologies in the Torah to go back 1,000 years, or 20 now, 40 Yobel from year 4000 Yah to year 2000 Yah, and know that 1968 BCE, Abraham and Yishak climbed Mount Moriah to affirm the narrative of the covenant. And we can use the genealogies to go back 40 Yobel from there to know that it was 3968 BCE that Adam and Chava were booted out of the garden for not listening to Yahowah and acting on their own initiative. So it is fairly easy then to extrapolate forward from 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, to year 6000 Yah, and to recognize that just as the first three Moed Mikre were fulfilled in year 4000 Yah, that the last three will be fulfilled in year 6000 Yah. After all, that menorah over my shoulder says exactly that, with one in the middle, and the one in the middle is named 7 sevens. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to subtract 7 years from 2033, and you end up at Shabuah in 2026. So all the information there is there to make the proper calculations, but we are calculating. We're doing some math here. We're making connections to understand. So all of those things said, as someone supporting Yahowah's intent of Shabuah, which is to call his people home, to bring them home, to bring them together, and to bring them home, for them to be productive and fruitful again. Your mission is to do the following. Then you should act upon and engage in the festival feast of Shabuah. Pretty clear, right? Ashah means to do, to attend, to celebrate, to participate in. It doesn't mean to sit there on your laurels and expect Yahowah to come by and pluck you out of this world so that you have no more concerns. Exactly the opposite of that. You're being asked to act. You're being asked to engage. And it was written in the Call Perfect for a prescribed period of time regarding the Chag Shabuah, the festival feast of Shabuah. which is to approach Yahweh, our God, doing so with a solvent. Now, previously we were told out of the homes of Israelites, they were asked to bring 2 loaves of bread. First things first, the bread were coming out of the homes of Israelites. Israelites didn't have a lot of goyim in their homes. Those loaves of bread would have represented Yisrael and Yehudah. But now, in addition, we're being asked to bring the universal solvent, a misa, with an appropriately affordable portion of masas, an inexpensive but invisible and dissolvable liquid with life-sustaining and cleansing properties, also known as water. Now, Yahweh could have just said mayim waters and be done with it, but what would the fun of that be? He said, okay, I'll bring you some water. So what? I got some bread, I got some water. Because if he presents it this way, as a solvent, then you are prone to consider, what are the qualities of water? And why is he asking us to bring it to the relationship? And of course, he begins with the thing that is the most interesting aspect of water. It's a solvent. Because of the chemical composition of H2O and the way that the molecules bind, things cling to it. It enables us to remove impurities. When we drink it, it cleanses our system. When we bathe in it, it cleanses our skin. We wash our clothes in it because it has a tendency to remove the impurities. They go away with the water. They cling to the water rather than dissolve in the water, rather than staying on our clothes. It's a solvent. And cleansing with a solvent is reminiscent of us being perfected, us being squeaky clean before Yahweh. And of course, water is not only the source of life, it refreshes life. It makes life possible. It sustains life. We can't even go more than 2 days without it. So, Yahweh wants us to bring some water. It's a voluntary offering, he said. Do so on your own initiative, from your own hand, which to demonstrate the way to the benefits of the relationship and to give. Nathan, we're giving something. We're giving something of ourselves. Makes a lot of sense too, because we're mostly water. So we're giving something of ourselves. Nathan, which we are to compare to how in this relationship, Yahweh, our God, continues to bless and adore us. Barak kneels down and favors us, lifting us up, bequeathing us with greatness. Pure and perfect. This is something where we receive the benefits on an ongoing basis. All right. So as I was thinking about this, I decided to write down what I thought were the 7 most important insights that we can glean, since this is a harvest after all, from these instructions. And here's my take on them. Number 1, we're being asked to engage in the process and to contribute to the intent of Shabuah. We're being asked to engage. If you're not engaged, then you're not part of Shabuah. 2, Shabuah is a celebration of life with Yahweh. It is a chag. So this day is about celebrating our relationship with God. 3, in addition to the 2 loaves of bread, likely representing Israel and Yehudim, we are to bring some water with us, recognizing its life-giving, life-sustaining, refreshing, restorative, and cleansing properties. Number 4, with our contributions on this day, we are tangibly demonstrating the very benefits of the relationship. That's what God said. Our actions, our involvement on this day manifests the very benefits of being in the relationship. We ought to do it because of how much this relationship means to us, how wonderful the covenant is, and how much we want to share it with others, knowing that not just the bigger, the better God's family is, the more wonderful people that are included in it, the more the result will be enjoyable for all of us, the richer the experience for all of us. Number 5, on Shabuah, and unlike any of the other Mikre, we're asked to make a contribution and give of ourselves so that we show our appreciation for what Yahweh is doing in return. Number 6, Yahweh is promising to bless and adore those who do these things on this day, lifting us up. Now, this suggests that 7, not only are we being asked to continue to work together, but that our results here are going to be exceedingly beneficial, favored and blessed by God himself. That's a lot. The fact that Shamak being elated in the moment, was scribed in the perfect conjugation. It seems to be saying that our contributions to Shabuah will be limited to a prescribed period of time. And if this is the intent, then Shabuah is not the first day of eternal life in heaven for harvestees. You can and should genuinely rejoice and be glad in the moment. Shamak. You can express joy and happiness, being elated, called perfect, masculine singular, in the presence of, or probably more correctly, before the appearance of Yahweh, your God. And your son and your daughter. Yes, I said that correctly. I did not say and your sons and your daughters. It says, and your ben, wa ben ata, wa bath ata, all singular, and your son and your daughter. And your male co-worker and your female co-worker who measures up. Wa ibed, the Hebrew word for work, abad, ata, singular, masculine, and ama, ata, all singular again, with ama also being the Hebrew word for cubit, which is why I said female co-worker who measures up. The male co-worker is a worker. He's just strictly abad, which means to engage and do the work that needs to be done. Next is, so that's so far 4 people, all singular. The 5th, a Loey, a uniter, one who joins us together, who, to benefit from the relationship, is reasonable and thoughtful in your community. This uniter is, by this definition, someone who is very thoughtful and rational and who is engaged in this community. It, by the way, is corrected to the singular form through 4Q30 Dwit, which is among the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the sojourner, the ger, who was on this journey and who endures for a time. The newcomer on a voyage of discovery who remains. The orphan, who is fatherless, Yada Yahowah, the isolated without resources. This one is actually genderless, singular. And the widow, Yada Almanah, the forsaken who has been bound in silence without a husband, feminine, singular. Now, that list of people is 8 total. It says of these, they're all wanting to be led on the correct path. They're all in your midst, standing up at the place, which to show the way to receive the benefits of the relationship, Yahweh, your God, chooses for his personal and proper name to dwell and reside. Any wonder he wanted me to call this program the YAHOWAH blog? And it is the YAHOWAH blog on the Facebook site, on YouTube, and on X. Is it any wonder that the website that presents all of the books that we have collaborated on together is called Yada Yahowah? Now, when considered from the context of what we have just observed in Devarim throughout the Torah, we have 8 people delighted to be put to work just prior to the appearance of Yahweh. And we're going to engage in a manner that properly reflects God's love for his people and his desire to favor them with his presence upon his appearance. We're all working for Yom Kippurim here. Those celebrating Shabuah, therefore, must be a man and a woman who are descendants from Yisrael, a man and a woman who are effective workers, but not descended from Yisrael, a uniter who is thoughtful and reasonable, a non-Yisraelite who is on a journey and endures for a time in support of Yisrael, a man and a woman who, having walked away from shattered families and marriages, have been abandoned by the culture of man for their decision to be on the correct path. These 8 individuals will congregate and celebrate in the place where Yahweh's name resides, which is here on our YadaYah.com homepage, Facebook, YouTube, and X, as we share the YAHOWAH blog. Now, since they are all singular, this isn't a list of those invited to the Shabuah harvest. It is instead those who will celebrate its purpose. And as such, Shabuah isn't an all-inclusive Chag celebration that the leprous Goyim Motherites perceive it to be by calling it our harvest. No, you're not even mentioned. Even the 2 loaves, since they come out of the house of Yisrael, cannot represent Goyim. This means that everyone invited, participating in and contributing to Shabuah, will be affiliated with Yisrael in one way or another, naturally born or associated by choice and by conduct, by effort. Now, with this in mind, I see the 8 people in the celebrant list breaking down as follows. 2 Yehudim, beloved of Yah, Jewish men. The 2 Jewish men, one represented by a son, a descendant of Yisrael, generations from the time this was spoken all the way to this day. And the Loed uniter would be a Yisraelite. 2 Yehudim women, the Bath daughter, a descendant long removed from the time that Moshe shared these words, as well as the Almana, the widow. There are 2 non-Yisraelite men, the Ebed and the Ger. If you're going to be working in and amongst Yisrael and you are not listed as a native son, then you are from a different ethnicity. 2 non-Yisraelite men, the Ebed and the Ger. 1 non-Yisraelite woman, the Emma, the widow. And 1 individual who could be either ethnicity or gender, the Yathrom, fatherless orphan. Therefore, this devoted core of Shabuaites includes, I did make up that word, includes 4 or 5 Jews, 3 or 4 Gentiles, with 4 or 5 of these contributors being men and 3 or 4 being women. Also adding to the intrigue is whether the final Zeroah, Yada, is you that was described in this narrative, or if he is depicted as the Ger, and whether his wife Leah is the Bath daughter or the Almana, the widow, having had her people and nation and husband from her first marriage abandon her. So it's a lot to think about there, isn't it? You notice, too, there was no mention of the things that I have previously just kind of thrown off the top of my head and say, it's an all-inclusive party, and Yehudim and Goyim. Doesn't say that, does it? Doesn't mention Yehudim once, doesn't mention Goyim once. Young and old doesn't mention that either. Ever. Rich and poor doesn't say that either. It's a very specific list, and even an intriguing list with the Loe and the Ger, and with a son, with a daughter, with a male co-worker and a female co-worker, and an orphan and a widow. It's a really an interesting list, and I think we will spend much time trying to say, all right, who fits in these roles, since it was distinguished by Yahowah 3,400 years ago. But it does appear that there will be 8 people in particular who will have the core responsibility for assuring that we perform well on Shabuah, and leading up to Shabuah and following Shabuah, so that when Yahowah approaches, he is pleased with what we all have achieved together. And our purpose is to liberate Yisrael from being controlled by religion and politics. We are drawing God's people out of Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious and political oppression. And of the time, we are protecting them through the time of Yisrael's Sar troubles. Remember that indeed you once existed as a slave, an Ebed, as one who was worked in Mitzrayim, the crucibles of political and religious oppression, from Meh and Sar in the plural, within the cauldrons of cruel persecution where people are confined and restricted by military and economic institutions, the plural of Matzor, which is to be delineated as a foe and besieged during a time of testing and tribulation, from Shur, to be bound and confined by an adversary. All of these are relevant. And so God says, be observant, and then act upon these prescribed prescriptions for living. Our goal, your purpose, God's will for your life, is for you to closely examine and carefully consider Yahweh's prescriptions to cut you into the relationship and to live life to the fullest, so that you can act upon them, so that you can engage in this noble pursuit through Shabuah and Teruah to Yom Kippurim and Sukkah. Are you with me? You ready to go? Do you know what we're being asked to do? Are you now going to be just sitting there waiting to be taken out of the game? Are you ready to engage in the game? What do they say? Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. So whether it's 8 or 800 or even 8,000, we prevail by being observant and then acting upon what we learn, profiting from the prescribed inscriptions to be cut into the relationship and to get the most out of life. This is Shabuah. And this has been the 15th episode of the YAHOWAH blog on Qatsyr harvests. I am your host, Craig Winn, and I thank you for listening.